Oh, I'm so excited. Look at my beautiful friend, Dawn Smith. Jordan, wave, Dawn.
Look at my beautiful friend, Jane.
Listen, we want to say color.
Yeah, we got the blue memo.
Got the blue. And we're both talking about our kitty cats just walking across.
Yes, you never know. In my house, there may be a cat that walks across this laptop. There may be a dog that joins in and starts singing. You just never know.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to jump into that after we kind of set things up a little bit, Dawn, because you've been so clever. And, I met you, gosh, can we say it's like 30-something years ago?
I remember the first time I met you. Do you remember this story, Jane?
I know you were playing the piano singing My Father's Eyes for Junior Miss, and I thought you were amazing.
Yes, true that. Thank you for that. But actually, the first time I remember actually meeting you when I was Miss South Carolina is, I think I've told you this story, but I was asleep in Jack Brantley's house as the newly crowned Miss South Carolina. Do you remember? And I was in the Miss America room, and I'm so enthralled with the whole thing. And of course, I just think you're amazing because you're a former Miss South Carolina, and it hasn't hit me yet. I'm Miss South Carolina, because y'all were the stars. And anyway, and I am dead asleep in that room. And there's this face over my bed. Good morning. And I'm like, what is going on? And it was you. But I remember being that little miss in Junior Miss. And of course, I didn't win. But I just remember, I just thought all of you former Miss South Carolinas were just movie stars. And you really are in your own way that God's used you and taken your lives and your paths. And now I'm honored to be one of them. But I remember that. And I just thought you were amazing. So and I still do think you're amazing. And you're my friend. Now we're friends.
I know. Listen, mutual fan club, because your story is so amazing. And before I knew you, really knew you, I knew the story and how God has placed you in so many incredible, Billy Graham Crusade. Well, that had to be, Dawn, one of the total highlights with your voice. And let me say this too. When you and I got goosebumps. When you sang at our church and did your program, I think your voice is better than ever. And you also teach voice. Is that, am I right? I think it's better. But is that possible?
Thank you, Jane.
Oh my gosh.
It's our thank you for that. And Billy Graham people have asked me what was the highlight of my year when I was Miss South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And that by far was it. Getting invited to share my story and sing Amazing Grace on the Billy Graham Crusade was the most humbling, out of body almost experience. Like I was just this little country girl from Red Bank, South Carolina. And my story was very well known because my family story is the largest manhunt still to this day in South Carolina's history. And, while that's nothing anybody would ever choose to have as a part of their resume or their story, God, as only He can, has chosen to take it and make it a beautiful thing for others' good and for His glory. So I'm so grateful for that. But, I do teach private piano and voice now. And I'm telling you, I just turned 60 and I have to work really hard at my voice. I literally have a voice coach. I work really, really hard at it. And she calls it going to the vocal gym. And it's with anything else, if you don't use it, you lose it. You got to work hard to keep it. But same with you. My gosh, you sing it. I get to hear you every year just about at the Miss South Carolina pageant, and you sing the national anthem. I'm like, Jane, you're sounding good and healthy.
Yeah, I'm trying to be too, Dawn.
Yeah.
I think it's a gift, and why in the heck am I gonna, get rid of it and squander it and not develop it and keep it spit and polish, so to speak. But so can you tell the story? And let me back up to how many Lifetime movies has this been made into? Is it at least 2?
There's only one movie. There are lots of documentaries, lots of podcasts. I just did a podcast that dropped last Friday, a week ago from us talking right now with a guy in Australia. And he read about my story in an article somewhere. I was thinking the other day, I know that Billy Graham Crusade it still airs. So now I'm on the Billy Graham Classics. So you're looking at a living classic.
That's all right. You're
But that's okay. I'll take it.
That's right. Take it.
But I feel like because that still airs, because there's so many documentaries and so many programs that people continue to know about my story, the part of my story that is most well known. And so the movie aired in 1991 on CBS first, and it was called Nightmare in Columbia County. And then it was moved over to Lifetime Television. And then from Lifetime Television, they changed the title, and it's now on Netflix, and the title is Victim of Beauty. So it's just the one movie, but it is amazing to me. I was just putting out my monthly newsletter yesterday.
I thought,
and I thank you. And I have been so overwhelmed literally lately of just these people around the world. And one story in particular, there was a gentleman who wrote me from Germany on Instagram, and he said, "Hello from Germany. I've just gotten your book." And he showed me a picture of my first book, Grace So Amazing. It had the original cover. I don't know where he got it, but he said all the way from the United States to Germany. And he began to talk about how that book God used in his life to change his life. And I sit in such awe and humility of that. Like I can't even believe what God's done. And I look back and I know that when I was a 21-year-old college rising senior and tragedy struck my family, at that point at 21, I could never imagine sitting here with you at 60 and saying, God has been so gracious. God has done exactly what his word says that he will do, cause all things to work together for good for those who love him.
And ashes to gold.
Yeah. And so it really is a very overwhelming feeling.
Well, most people do know, but hopefully with this StreamYard, and it's going to be blasted out and cut up, by the way, and on YouTube, and I'll send you the links. Can you share that story with everyone?
Sure. I was 21 and I was at Columbia College. I was a vocal performance major. I'm the oldest of 3 children. I grew up in Lexington, South Carolina. If we want to get real, it was Red Bank in the middle of a field, 20 acres. And my daddy plopped our house in the middle of this field. And so my sister Shari was 17, about to be 18. And she was about to graduate from high school. And my little brother was 15. And Shari was 2 days from high school graduation. And she had been practicing the national anthem at her high school. She was going to sing there, and then she was going on a cruise with her classmates, and then she was coming to Columbia College in the fall to study music as well. And the day of the graduation rehearsal, she had pulled her car into the driveway, as she did every day. You know, we just have those things that we do every day. Got out of the car. Because we lived in the country, our house was about 750 feet from the road, long dirt driveway, lined with huge pine trees that we had planted, but they were tiny when we planted them. And she went to get the mail, and from what we understand happened, this man with a criminal record had seen her in town, thought she was beautiful, and she was, and he claimed to have pulled a gun, and he told her to get in the car, and she got in the car, and he took her from us. And it was May 31st. So we're coming up on the 39th anniversary, which is hard to believe, because in my mind, Shari is always 17. And so that was back when there were no cell phones. I mean, you know, now we can see each other and we can text and we can FaceTime and all these things that we had none of that. We just had house phones back then. And so she literally disappeared. And it was 5 days that we did not know where she was. And this unknown man began to call her home, and he asked to speak to my mom. And so she was talking to this person, and she thought that it was an authority because he was talking about what Shari had on. She was at the mailbox. Her car was left running. Her purse was inside on the passenger seat. And then all of a sudden, my mom hung up the phone. And I remember she said, oh my God, that man has Shari.
Mm.
And that's when we realized that she had probably been kidnapped.
Mm.
And so he called 8 different times during that month-long investigation. We were literally prisoners in our own home. We did not leave the house. We could not leave the house. And it became very upsetting to my mother to talk to this person who had her daughter. I mean, you and I are mothers. I mean, I can't imagine. I love my children, and you love your children so much that when I put myself in my mother's shoes, I was a sister, but she was the mother. And as mothers, our children are a part of us. And my mom said her heart literally physically ached when Shari was taken. And I can get that as a mother. And so at 21 years old, I remember this really lovely FBI agent lady asking me to go upstairs into my bedroom. And she said, we're going to need to ask you to do something. We need for you to answer the phone. It's too upsetting for your mom. And that was back when FBI profiling was a brand new science. And so they had put together this profile of this man that if I could be kind and patient and understanding and keep him on the phone as long as possible, they would trace the call and they would hopefully get Shari back. And I remember all these years later, I remember being asked that question. I didn't even hesitate. I said, yes, I'll do it. I'll do whatever I can do. Because it was a very helpless feeling, Jane. I mean, we were just stuck at home waiting. And I thought, well, at least this is something I can actively do to help, to try to get my sister back. And so that's how it began. And it's such a long story. But he ended up killing my sister and calling her home and giving me directions to her body. But before he killed her, he allowed her to write the most amazing letter. And if people have seen the FBI profiler, this episode is called Last Will. FBI profile, I think is what it's on. And it's about Shari's letter and how her letter was such a gift to my family, because in that letter, at 17 years old, she is sitting in this room with this man who has told her he's going to take her life. And she's looking at that blank piece of paper. And often when I share her letter, I often think, how in the world would I face that blank piece of paper, even at this age, knowing those would be the last words I would ever speak to my children, to my family, to my loved ones. And there was no fear in her letter. There was so much faith. And at 17 years old, she told my family not to let her death ruin our lives, to keep living one day at a time for Jesus. She said some good will come out of this. And then she quoted that Romans 8:28 that I shared earlier. And I look back and I am so overwhelmed with how God, and only God, can take such tragedy and turn it into such a beautiful tool and story for his glory alone. You know, it is a story I have been called upon to share thousands and thousands of times. And it's gotten so much easier over the years. But I remember when I was first crowned Miss South Carolina, and my very first appearance was at Flat Rock Baptist Church in Liberty, South Carolina. And I had been Miss Liberty, and then I was Miss South Carolina, and they asked me to come tell my story and sing Amazing Grace. And Jane, I remember just sobbing in that pulpit, just could not tell the story without crying. But you know, the Lord is so gracious, and he brings healing, and he brings hope, and he brings purpose in the pain. And then all of a sudden I can talk about it, because the Lord's brought peace and forgiveness and healing. And it really is a privilege. I just thank you for having me on your podcast, because it is, you know, when somebody asks me, who are you? And I really am. And I love all your books. I love your Southern humor, and I'm a Southern girl right with you. But, you know, I say I'm just a simple Southern woman. I love Jesus, and I love to share the message of hope that he's written into my life. And I really do. And so I just thank you for inviting me to come be on here and share it, because my prayer is always that God would use this story of this simple girl from South Carolina to just speak hope into the lives of other people who might be feeling hopeless, who might be in circumstances that are beyond comprehension that they'll ever be okay again. I just had a friend call me night before last, and this friend just said, what I'm going through is so painful. I don't know if I'm ever going to be okay. And I said, excuse me, do you not know me?
Yeah.
If I'm okay, God says you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But it is painful, and it is a process. And that's what people seem to forget. 1985 was 39 years ago, and I wasn't okay in 1985. But the next year, God allowed me the platform of being Miss South Carolina. And he began to allow me to see the purpose that he could bring about, even from this deep, dark tragedy.
Well, I've seen you share your testimony and seen you in churches and on stages, and you are the most comfortable, relatable with so much that you've experienced in your life. I feel like every time I'm sitting in your den, just the two of us, and that's a gift. Not many people can do that. And when you talk about how God can use through the process of time. When I was speaking in Arkansas last year, I met an elderly woman. She was in her 90s. And I said, well, what's the secret? She said, my favorite verse of scripture. It's in the Bible 737 times. She said, and this is it. And it came to pass.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Isn't that the best? Because stuff come and it will pass.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and we think things are permanent. And that's where some people can't unwrap their head around that to move to the next level. And I absolutely, when you tell the story, Dawn, that the courage you had at such a young age, and then just to be honest, you should have been Miss America. I don't know who won that year, but you were second runner up in that incredibly gorgeous white dress. And I just knew you were going to win. It was just such a given. But still, God can use all of these opportunities regardless. To help grow his kingdom. And we have to trust that.
Well, and thank you for saying that. But you know what? I wasn't meant to be Miss America. And I am so absolutely certain I've walked the path that the Lord had for me to walk. And I knew when I was a junior in high school that he had called me to commit my life to ministry. And I don't know what that path would have looked like if I were Miss America. But you know what? I'm so grateful for where he has allowed me to walk in the places and I believe every single place, every big appointment, every tiny, tiny church, they are divine appointments. Yes. And each, just like you, each and every one that he gives us, they are, here you go. This is where I want you to go. And maybe I've been places I never would have been. Well, not maybe, absolutely, had I been Miss America. And so I don't even think about that anymore, honestly.
I know, because it just comes a time in life where you just, wherever God has placed you, you know it's right.
Just last week, I had the privilege of being in this precious little nursing home here in town. And the lady that runs the activities had reached out and she said, would you come? We would love to do a Mother's Day for our residents and their daughters. I'm telling you, Jane, it was one of the most moving places I've been. So it's not about grandeur and thousands of people. It's just about being faithful where God places us. I remember when I was Miss South Carolina, and Dr. John Bassanio was the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Houston, Texas. And they invited me to come for Easter. And they had it at the Omni in Houston. And I'm this little girl who's grown up in a little country Baptist church in South Carolina. And they had 9,000 people for church that Sunday morning. And I was scared out of my mind, for one thing. And I shared my story and I sang. And I remember saying, Brother John, what should I do? I want my ministry to grow. What should I do? And he always called me Little Dawn. He was a very big man and his voice sounds like what I think God's voice sounds like. And he said, Little Dawn, just be faithful wherever God places you, whether it's before a crowd of thousands or in a nursing home. And I took that to heart. And because now I have people saying, I want to get where you are. How do I do it? And I'm like, well, and sometimes it's men. I'm like, well, I don't think you can win Miss South Carolina, at least back then. And I'm like, and I just say, you've just got to be faithful to serve where God gives you opportunity. And sometimes it's been those places last week. It was Thursday. It was the sweetest, most precious. And then I got a letter from the lady yesterday just saying, can I just tell you a few stories of how God used your story? And those, and I, and that's when you just go, wow, wherever I've been, it's exactly where he's placed us. And we can just rest in that. And even if we're not authors and Christian speakers and former Miss South Carolinas and humorists and best-selling authors like you are, but if we are in the workforce, or we're stay-at-home moms, or we're businessmen, wherever we are people of influence. And that's where God has placed us to live out our lives, share the story he's writing. And that's how we make a difference. And I just think it's the body of Christ, and it's kingdom work every single one of us are doing. I went into that recording studio last week to do the podcast that was in Australia. And I walked into this very different from the recording studios that I'm used to being in. And at first I could tell the gentleman there who owned it was looking at me like, what is this blonde chick doing here? And who is she? And I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay, it looks like they do mostly rap music here. This is so not my genre. And I just said, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your studio. By the end of the recording, Jane, we were hugging each other, and he was saying, I feel like I've met a true sister and a true friend. I said, and you are my brother, and you are making a difference here in this studio for artists with your professionalism. And it was just the coolest thing. Two people from totally different walks of life, but the common thread is Christ. And that we are each wanting to do what we can do where he has placed us for the good of other people. And it was such a cool thing to leave that place going, that was nothing like what I thought it was going to be when I first walked in there.
And you know what is so wonderful, and I think all of us need to be reminded that you reached out and said, tell me about you. And then that just opens the door for just very candid conversation.
Yeah. And he was this, I mean, he had the big chain, and he owned the studio. And I said, well, tell me about your studio. And so then he told me his name, and he said his name was, I won't say his name, but anyway, and it was a biblical name. I said, okay, tell me about your mama. He goes, oh, my mama is an ordained minister of the gospel. I said, I knew it.
That's her name.
I knew you had a praying mama, because I said, tell me about yourself. And this guy starts telling me that he was doing all the wrong things in his life, involved in the wrong people and the wrong things. And he just cried out to God. And I mean, because he said, what are you doing here? What are you doing today? And I told him I'm a Christian and I'm going to tell my story on this podcast. And so that obviously made him feel comfortable to say. And one day I just said, God, what do you want me to do with my life? I want a purpose. And he goes, and God plopped this studio down in my lap. I said, see, this is where you're supposed to be. And this was not a chance meeting. It was a divine appointment, and we are friends. And I've invited him to my church. He says he's going to come. But, it's just those little seeds. I've really started praying, God, help me to be aware of the divine appointments that you put in my life today, whether I'm in the line at the post office, or I'm in the grocery store, or I'm walking my dog and somebody stops and goes, oh my gosh, that's not John Smith Jordan, but that's Sammy the singing dog.
Yeah, that's it. I want to get to that. But first, I'm going to tell everybody how to get in touch with you. I'm going to put a trailer at the bottom.
Oh, thank you. Probably the easiest way, my website is www.dawnsmithjordan.com. And there's all the contact information on there.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Now let's go to the idea. Now, first it was Zoe. Do you have a copy? Do you have a?
I do. I brought it in here with me.
Start with Zoe.
So in the pandemic, I have for 37 years sung an average of about 75 concerts and ministry events a year. Of course, when the pandemic happened, I became unemployed and everything was wiped off the calendar. And I remember I always wondered, I wonder what I would do if people quit inviting me to come. Well, it happened. And so first thing I did was I went on Facebook and I said, anybody out there ever wanted to learn to play the piano or sing? I'm your chick. Reach out. And Jane, God in his mercy, gave me 40 music students over Zoom.
gosh.
And so I've never worked so hard in my life. But, we had a lot of time. I planted flowers for the first time on my patio. I did a garden for the first time. Like I did all these things I'd never had time to do because I was always like you and like me, living out of a suitcase from one event to the next. And I had downtime and I thought, I've always wanted to write a children's book. And I did. And it's about my cat, Zoe the Christmas kitty. And she is the funniest thing. And she was in here right before we got on. But that's why I wrote a book about her. Yeah. But Zoe's story is in a Reader's Digest version. I had gone, my cat had passed. And I had a dog, and I always like having a cat and a dog for when I travel. They have each other, their company for each other. And so I went to the shelter. All my animals are rescues, and I'm a great advocate for rescues. And the proceeds from these books also go to a local shelter here in Columbia, where I got my dog. And so anyway, but I had picked out this sweet little 6-month-old yellow and white kitty. And I had to go away that weekend. And so this was the cat that I picked out.
Oh, the little orange tat.
The little cute one. And so by the time I got home on Monday and I called the shelter and I said, I'm on the way to get the kitten, she said, well, there was a special needs girl and her parents that came in over the weekend, and she and that kitten connected. And I knew that you'd be okay, that I let her go. And I was like, okay. Yeah. And so she goes, but there is a kitten here who desperately needs somebody to love her. And she was born feral and she was born blind. And all of her siblings were adopted, so she brings out this little thing. Oh. And I'm like, that is not a pretty kitty like the yellow one. But she said, I have been praying for her every day and putting drops in her eyes. And Jane, I want you to know, God healed Zoe's eyes.
Oh my goodness.
And you can see. And so the first time that I pulled out the Christmas tree, she was like, what is going on? And she made her way to the top of the Christmas tree, ruined that Christmas tree. But the moral of the story, and really the point of the book, is James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from the Father above. And that wasn't the gift that I wanted. I wanted that little yellow kitten.
Right.
But that kitten was meant for that special needs. And Zoe was meant for me. Yeah. And God knows what we need better than what we think we want. And his gifts are always better and perfect. And she was the perfect kitten for me. And she has been the funniest, greatest joy. Here is a picture. Oh, that's Sammy's book. Hang on. I'll go back. So, I mean, she has just been in that Christmas tree. There she is.
Oh my gosh.
But we're about to re-release this book because so many people have been so great and supportive, and so they just love her story and love her book. We just about sold out of the first printing, so we are reprinting, and the reprint is going to have QR codes like we have in my dog's book.
I love that. So I remember when I saw that Zoe, the Christmas kitty, and you told me, you said, I absolutely cannot keep up with the orders.
It was so great. It was so fun. And the thing about it is, Jane, my story is a story of hope, but it's a very heavy and deep story.
Yeah. Yes.
And I love the story God's written into my life, but I really have had so much fun with these little stories because they're sweet and they're joyful and they're bright and they're positive and they're just happy stories.
Yeah, I love that.
So then my dog Cookie, who was Zoe's, she was so funny. When I first adopted her, she crawled right up next to Cookie like he was her mother and would try to nurse on Cookie. So Cookie passed. He was 15, and Zoe and I were just not okay without our dog. And so a month had passed, and I went to the shelter just to window shop. Well, you know how women in window shopping is. And so this was Cookie's. Look at Cookie's face. Okay. See,
Oh,
there's the face.
yes.
I
Oh.
walk in the shelter and I see all these dogs. And of course, my heart goes out to all of them. And then I see this face.
Oh, look at that.
And
Oh,
I'm like, oh my gosh, his face has the same widow's peak looking thing like my dog
yes.
Cookie. And I said, I want to see that dog. The
Oh.
crazy thing is, my dog had died 1 month before I walked into that shelter.
Mm.
Sammy's family had dropped him off at the municipal shelter 1 month ago.
Uh-uh.
And the day before he was moved to the rescue where I got him, is when I decided I'd go look the next day. Think about the timing of that.
Wow.
He had been there for 1 month. No, yeah, he'd been there 1 month. Not one single person had taken a look at that dog.
Oh my goodness.
Nobody. And you know why? Because I believe God was saving him for me.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
so here he is. That's when I met him. And there's me.
Oh, I love that.
And so I was actually, so, and your listeners might not know, but there he is on adoption day. And let me just say, you've met my college roommate, Julie. Her niece is my illustrator. Rebecca Parfit is the illustrator. So we kept it in the family because Julie's like family. Here's Sammy.
Beautiful job. Oh my goodness.
I mean, they are incredible. But, I sang the French aria in Miss America. And so I was getting ready right after I'd adopted Sammy, and I was getting ready to go sing for a ladies' event in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I was in the living room where the piano is, and I hit the high, went to the really high note, and I heard, ooh, and I was like, what is that sound? And it was my dog, look. And I just literally thought, look at this picture. She did such a great job.
I love that. Oh, I love that.
And there's Zoe. But I'm telling you, it has been so fun. So we put QR codes in Sammy's book so that you can see him. And I'm actually getting ready to send a video to America's Got Talent. I don't know if I'll get on, but I'm going to try it, of us singing the prayer. And it's a duet. And that is in the book as well. But it's just been the funniest thing because these two animals have amazing stories. And, the point of Sammy's book is that Sammy had a voice. And I don't know what led his other family to leave him at a shelter. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they ever knew that he had a voice and a song to sing. But given a second chance from somebody that was willing to give him a second chance, he found his voice. And so that's the message to children. Every single one of us has a voice. And every single one of us has a song to sing. And given the chance, we will. And so anyway, they are so sweet and they're so fun. And coming up on June 1st, Sammy goes with me to book signings. And it's the fun.
Good grief.
So fun. He goes with me. We've done book readings and book signings, and he will sing for the children. And he loves going because when he's done, he gets a cheeseburger every time. But it's been so much fun, Jane. And your books are so fun, but your books also have depth. And they have really good morals to the stories that you share. And the same with this, you can share deep messages in a really fun, sweet, engaging way. And I will say my Aunt Sue, who was Miss South Carolina, Aunt Sue, she was Miss South Carolina in 1965. She's my editor. So we have had more fun doing the books together. And we'd be on the phone with each other, editing and talking through it. And she'd be reading a part that she had suggested editing, and she'd just be, and then I'd be, and it's just been the sweetest process for all of those reasons.
Yeah, I love that. Well, do you have a copy of the book that you wrote? Is it Amazing Grace? I got all the books.
I do. I brought both in here because I thought you might ask me. I got all kinds of things on my desk, but this is my first book.
I've got that.
It's been through three covers. Yeah. This is the most recent cover, and so this is my first book. I wrote it in from 1989 to 1991, and this is the whole story of my sister's case. And I was living in Texas at the time. the movie was being done on CBS at the same time. God's timing was amazing because my family had been asked for years to be a part of movies, and we always said no. And this production company came to us and they said, we are doing the movie with or without you, but we'd really like your input. And so when I realized somebody was taking my family story and going to put it on TV, I wanted to be a part of that. And I just happened to have been writing this at the same time. And so I would write and I would send them the copy. And so that's why the movie is based on a true story, but so much of my story and our faith is in there. And so through this writing of this book, through the movie being done, I had also gotten a letter from the man that killed my sister. And he had asked if I would forgive him. And so that's journaled in here as well as, I mean, it was all such perfect timing that, I didn't hate him and I was in a very busy ministry. But anytime somebody would say, well, what about the man? How do you feel about him? It would send a twinge of irritation of, I can't believe you. How dare you ask me about him?
Yeah.
And so God wasn't finished with that work. And again, like I said earlier, it's a process. And I took 2 years before I could answer his letter. So in 1991, I wrote him back and I said, because of the grace of God in my own life, I am forgiven. And because of his forgiveness, I forgive you. Right. And my mother was the most amazing example because I think I have a picture. Here's my family. It's a really old picture. But there's mom and me and Robert and Shari and my dad. Right. And my precious mom, we had to meet that man in person and identify his voice as that of the caller when he was arrested. And he was arrested only because my sister's letter had an imprint of a phone number where he was house sitting, and her letter led to his capture. Yes. Which was miraculous. And so Mom and I had to go meet him. And the minute that he started talking, my mother just looked him in the face with such kindness. And she said, I know that you're the man that killed my Shari. And she said, and I'm looking at you and I realize it. And there's nothing you can say to make it better. You killed my daughter. She said, but I want you to know, I don't even hate you. And I pray God has mercy on your soul. And she said it was right then and there. She forgave him. And I said, Mom, how in the world could you speak those words to him? He didn't deserve it. She said the most amazing thing I've never forgotten, Jane. She said, the minute I saw that man, I didn't just see him as the man who killed my daughter, but I saw him as another mother's son.
Oh, wow.
She said, I wasn't the only mother that was hurting because of this.
Oh, wow.
And that was so incredibly powerful to me as a 21-year-old.
Oh, goodness.
And so I remember thinking, surely if my mother forgave that man on the spot, then I can forgive him. But I wasn't as gracious. It took 2 years before I came to that place. So that was my first book. And then here's the second follow-up, and it's called Thus Far, a book about life.
Yeah, I got that too.
And the lessons learned along the way. Yeah, we both got each other's books. and that is a follow-up since writing the first book. I went through an unwanted divorce when my kids were 1 and 4. And my sweet mama has now been with Shari and Jesus for 20 years and battled ovarian cancer. And so it's just a little more of the journey, a little more diving into the depth of the journey of forgiveness for me, which has played such a huge role in the freedom in which I now walk in my life. John 10:10 says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And that was the purpose that the enemy had in what happened in my family. But God says, but I have come that you may have abundant life. And I live the abundant life. I'll never forget this. I love to tell this story. I was in the church of the First Baptist Church of Wagner, South Carolina. You've probably been there. And it was a Sunday morning, and I was about to sing a concert, sitting on the front row, the prelude's playing, the opening prayer, all the things. And so I just happened to open up the bulletin. And I'm just kind of looking through, and the gentleman behind me says to the girl beside him, I heard him whisper, he goes, who is that? Talking about me. And she goes, that's our speaker singer for today. And I remember thinking, I just want to turn and go, I can hear you. I am right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he goes, oh, yeah. that's that girl whose sister was murdered.
Oh,
And I remember thinking, that is not all I am.
yeah.
That is not all there is to this story. And so that's where this book came from, to say, God is still writing my story. And that's a chapter, and that's a big chapter. And it was a defining moment in my life. Absolutely. And that is the story that most people remember me as. I was at a book signing last Thursday night with Sammy, and the girl in the booth beside me, we were just talking, and she said, "What is your name?" And I said, "I'm Dawn Smith Jordan." She goes, "Why do I know you?" And for some reason, I usually will just say, I get that a lot. I know I look familiar, and for some reason I said, "Do you watch a lot of crime documentaries and listen to podcasts?" She goes, "I do. Why?" And I said, "Well, my story has been a part of a lot of those." She goes, "Oh my gosh, what was your sister's name?" And she immediately knew me as that. And it was the craziest thing, because the man that killed my sister was house sitting for a family who was in Alabama visiting their son. She is from Alabama and was the nurse to that man.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I was just like, what is the chance I'm at this book signing with my dog? And that girl, and she was like, what? And it was just another divine appointment where I met her.
Right.
But the thing is, that's what people recognize me from. Oh, I have heard this all my life. You're Shari Smith's sister, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In the grocery store, wherever I am, it is everywhere I go, literally. And so I am grateful that that's a part of the story, but I want people to know that's not the end. And, one of my pastors, I loved a saying he used to say, he said, "If you ain't dead, God ain't done." And I ain't dead. I'm still kicking. And there's still so much more to tell and to write and to share, and journeys of even recent that I share in my concert about being a mom, about being a woman that is now, in her 60s. How did that happen? But, but I'm so grateful that the Lord continues to write chapters of our lives. And until he brings us home, our stories are still evolving and being finished for his glory. And he's not done yet.
I just feel like it's a refining process, and it never stops until we stop breathing.
But let me show you something that I brought. Let me show you what I brought in here.
No way. Oh.
Humble beginnings.
What's going on? Oh,
this was my first cassette.
Yes.
Dawn of a New Day, Miss South Carolina Sings for You. And I'm just like,
oh my God.
Yeah, but I bought some fun memorabilia.
Closet over here.
I know. But we all start where God starts us. And then he just keeps allowing more songs. There have been songs I've written out of this journey that I never would have written had he not allowed the things that he's allowed in my life.
Yeah.
And same with
last project. You were going to the recording studio because you had all these new tracks you were laying down and new music.
I recorded in August of last summer. I go to Austin every year and record with my wonderful producer, Phil Sandifer, and I stay in their home. He and his wife, Renee, are they're like family. We just have so much fun. But I recorded my 18th album with them. It's coming out this fall. And it's a compilation CD, but we also did some new ones. And because everything just got done so quickly, that we started my 19th project, which is going to be a worship album. And I literally just sat at the keys and played and sang songs, some of my favorite worship songs. My favorite one of all that we did is Goodness of God. And it says, all my life you have been faithful. And as long as I have breath, I'm going to sing of the goodness of God. And that's really how I feel. As long as God opens doors, as long as somebody invites me to come, I'm there. I am so grateful.
But Dawn, listening to you share from your heart, the message I keep getting is something that people miss. And yours is so unbelievably, incredibly poignant about what has happened and how God has used you. But I keep hearing, and I believe this with the core of my soul, it's whatever we go through, we have got to make peace.
Yes.
And we have to have an attitude of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
That is something, to me, people don't realize that when you, and it does take time, but when you hold on to that bitterness and malice, you're a prisoner. It's like when you forgive, you release the prisoner, and you know it was you.
Yeah.
But I think God cannot communicate with you effectively and all he wants to do until you release all of that in your heart, in your mind, and start the process. And I think that's when things start to happen. I really do. The desires of your heart are revealed, and you go like, "Oh my gosh, look!" And then stuff starts to unwind. That it's like a rope that's so tight and so knotted, and one by one, it starts to loosen up and loosen up, and then the floodgates open. That's how I look at forgiveness.
That's exactly what it is. And I feel like there are so many people that live their lives, and I hear from people all the time. Now that we have social media, we are so accessible to people that sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, the people that write and they tell me their stories and they say, I hear your story and I see your life, and they stop at the top. I'm like, no, because I love the saying that says, unforgiveness is a poison you drink hoping somebody else will die.
Yes.
And when we forgive, I remember this lady, her name is Angela Thomas, and she wrote these great books called My Single Mom Life. She's a Christian speaker, and I'll never forget reading her books. And I listened to her on a video on YouTube when she was speaking, and she's from North Carolina. So she had of course, we have South Carolina accents, but I never forget what she said. She said, it's like you are on your own death row, and you hold the key in your hand. And you can let yourself out, but you're choosing to stay on your own death row. And I was like, that's so right, because unforgiveness is a death row of our own choosing. We are choosing to stay there because we think we're hurting the other person, but the only person we're hurting is ourselves. And the truth of the matter is, I wrote Larry Gene Bell back. I don't know if that ever made a difference in his life for him to know, I forgive you for killing my sister. I forgave my husband. But I'm telling you right now, do you know who the prisoner was that was set free? Me. I am the woman that is walking in freedom and victory. And the scripture says, whom the Son has set free, he or she is free indeed.
Well, that's when you did our program in our church, and I've seen you so many times in different venues, you have, and it's so true, the Bible talks about the joy of the Lord is my strength. And as you shared, Dawn, your face is radiant of freedom. I'm not held captive by that. I am free from that. And it's the most amazing religious, spiritual Jesus moment to see a radiant, beautiful woman talk about some of the stuff you said, I thought, I did not know that. And I'm sitting, I looked at my daughter, I said, Carol, I did not know that. And But you're radiant, and your eyes are just the soul coming through, the sparkle of the soul of Christ within you. And that to me, if I knew your story was, shaking to the core, and I couldn't hear, I could see your face. I said, look at that face. That face is radiant with joy, outside of her circumstances. And that's what I don't think people get. And we desperately need that message of forgiveness and doing the work to get there. And it's not, like you said, it's not zippity doo dah. You have to start. In my own life, with my own situation that things have happened, I grit my teeth and go, I forgive them. In fact, in that little book I wrote, Rhinestones on My Flip Flops, I talk about potty prayers. I know this is crass, but they kept it in there. I would pray for people that I struggled with when I would get up at night, because to me, I'm releasing toxins both ways. And I'm thinking, and that's what my brain would start firing all the sad stuff. And I'd say, no, I'm forgiving them in the process. I am releasing the toxins. And that's when I would have prayer time at night. That's crazy. But it reminded me of how dangerous it is mentally and physically if we hold on to those toxins.
Exactly. And, the thing is when we come to the place of forgiveness, then we are free to let go of the past, to look ahead and not keep looking back. But I mean, you know, there are things in my life I've been through that I can go, sometimes I'm so sad that happened. And, but I'm going to choose again today to not focus there. And one of the things that I've chosen to do over the years is instead of looking at what I've lost, I look at what I have left. And I still have this life that God has entrusted to me for however many days he chooses to keep me on this earth. And if I would have let bitterness and anger and resentment take hold of my life back as a 21-year-old, then I would not be sitting here with you today saying
that's very true.
There is freedom in Christ, and it takes hard work and it takes determination. And let me tell you, when I forgave, I got my Bible and I found every single verse that had to do with forgiveness, every single verse, because I said, God, make me willing to even care to forgive him, because I don't care. I'm just keeping it real. He murdered my sister. He doesn't deserve it. I get that you forgave me, but he doesn't deserve it. And I don't know that I can do it. So help me to even care, first of all. Now help me to have the want to try. Now show me how to do it. Okay, here it says, forgive as you've been forgiven in Colossians 3. What does that look like? Well, and then he would take me to Jesus on the cross said, Father, forgive them. So it was a time of being in the Word of God going, this is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. And I don't know what to do or how to do it, but I want to do it. God, show me. And when we cry out to God, he says he will be found and he will show us. And but we got to do the hard work. And there are so many people that I've met that just are stuck back where they are, and whatever happened to them, that defines who they are. But I am not defining myself as Shari's sister. I am determined to be the woman God's created me to be.
And I don't know if you know this, but Larry Jean Bell also kidnapped another little girl. I know you know that, but in the trailer, she was playing in the yard. And did he kill her as well?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So he called with Shari's directions to her body, and then he called again and he gave directions to a 9-year-old little girl. She had been playing in front of her family's home with her brother, and he snatched her and he killed her, and he called and gave me directions to her body. Gracious. And then in the last phone call, he told me he'd get me too, that I'd be next. And so, you know, not only have I
forgive, Dawn, that's a lot to forgive.
But you know what, Jane? It is. But when we look at people through the eyes of grace, like God looks at us, we can forgive. There used to be a song I sang back in my early days of ministry called I'm a Sinner. I'm just a sinner saved by grace.
Yes, I love that.
And I remember being at the South Carolina Baptist Conference. Oh my gosh, I can still see the church I was in. I sang that song and they asked me to come back up and sing it again. And the pastors were hooping and hollering, because that's the reality of how do we forgive? My church has a saying that says, forgiven people forgive people.
Yes.
It's so simple. But the reality is, because of Christ, because I walk in the freedom from my sin, I've never killed anybody, but I flat sin. Then I am able to extend the same forgiveness to somebody else, only because I've received it.
When I mentioned, I don't know if you know this, and then I started with the Larry Jean Bell kidnapping. We were all at the beach, bunch of friends at Myrtle Beach, and we had little toddler children, and we were glued to the news. It was only like WIS, or we could pick it up on the radio to hear, have they found Shari?
Everybody was.
But there was an APB put out that if your child is a toddler or a young or little girl with blonde curly hair, do not let that child out.
I have chills, because I'm telling you, I have chills, because I meet people every time I share my story, every church I've ever been in, that tell me I was a little girl and my mama wouldn't let me go outside and play.
And we were sitting there looking at all of these little blonde curly haired children that we had playing at the beach, and we were just frozen in fear. You know,
and so many moms, just like you, saying to me, my little girl, and I posted on my Facebook yesterday. I just put out I do a monthly newsletter, and so the newsletter went out, and I posted it on my Facebook and Instagram, and I haven't even read the messages. It's hundreds and hundreds of comments and messages of people saying where they were, what they remember. And I'm talking, I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I will read every one of them. But it's because our story was not the norm back then. And it touched and affected so many people. And sadly, it's on the news every day now, but back then it wasn't. And what you just told me is what I've heard more than anything else. I was a mother of little ones. My children did not go outside. We were scared to death.
We were scared of being in Myrtle Beach and knowing this guy was on the loose. You know, I mean, it made all of us, it brought it home to us as mothers. And it was one of the scariest things. And then we were so praying for Shari that she would be found. And did she had a medical condition, or was she diabetic or something, Dawn?
Yes, she did. She had it's diabetes insipidus, which is water diabetes. It was a very rare form of diabetes. There were only 2 children in the state of South Carolina that had it. It was Shari and one other girl. And so when she was taken, her insulin, which was a nasal, she blew it up into her nose through a little tiny tube. And later it was a spray, but it was in her purse, left on the passenger seat in her car that was left running. And that it wasn't just that we were worried what this person might do to her, but that without her insulin, her body, the best way to describe it was like if you drink a glass of water with Shari, if she didn't have her insulin, it'd be like pouring a glass of water through a colander. Her body could not absorb the water, and she would become severely dehydrated to the point of death within 48 hours. And so without that medication, we were so worried that she would not survive. And that's why my mother and I kept pleading, please give her back. She needs her medicine.
Right.
And, you know, little did we know he was leading us to believe she was alive, but he killed her the first time.
I remember that. I just think how God, just the Holy Spirit led you all to be, and you had to be so calm. And so you were so young, and how you were so focused on that, and yet forgave someone for that horrific act, and so many other hits through life. But the thing is, you know, I always love talking about, I don't know if you remember the girl that fell down the stairs at Miss South Carolina. It's definitely, you know, not a riveting story, but it's a poignant story that I like to tell when I speak. But I remember she had everything going for her, the Stephen Urich, the chandelier, the Aussie freeze. She fell down, and this was before you competed. And she would just look absolutely ridiculous, but she got up.
Yeah.
She got up. She wouldn't stay down. And I can identify with falling down. Now, are we going to stay down?
Yeah.
And are we going to get up and make wonderful things happen and be a beacon for other people and lead them as the best they can for themselves? And that's really what we're doing in your faith walk, my faith walk. Even when I speak to secular audiences, I always try to throw in a spiritual principle so they'll know, you know, from whence I come. And I want to share that part. There's a spiritual component to all of this and a Christian commitment. And so I love what you do. I love that God is still giving you the beauty, and you're gorgeous, but more gorgeous on the inside, equally on the outside. And I love that. And there's so many people that, you know, I have listened to, that I've been inspired by. You are definitely at the very top of my list, because I love you, sister. You are amazing, Dawn. Thank you for your time. And you're so busy, and I was busy this week and last week. Together. You're going to bless a lot of people, and I can't wait to share this on the different platforms, folks, to look out. And I'll give you links and all that. But this has just been, I'm so encouraged and inspired. And every time I'm with you, and when we sit by one another at the pageant, you got to sit by me now.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Do you remember when we had our 70th anniversary? It was a lot of fun, but I think Miriam Breckenridge Stevenson, she was there. I don't know. I believe she's since deceased, I'm thinking.
Yes.
But you remember we all went around the room. I wrote about this. And somebody said, well, what are y'all doing? Somebody said, I just, you know, Kimberly, her Broadway stuff is just so incredible. And somebody said, well, I wrote a book. And I said, well, I just recorded a CD. I hate to date us. So anyway, and then it got to Miriam, and she said, well, I got you all beat. I had a colonoscopy, and it was clean. you, darling. Love you. See you.
Thank
God, in just a few weeks.
I love you too.